Good day, sir. My name is Xia Lilian and my matrix number is 276990. Today, I'm going to present the impact of household expenditure during pandemic COVID-19 in Penang. The outbreak of COVID-19 forced Malaysia to implement a lockdown. Businesses that failed to sustain themselves during the COVID-19 pandemic decided to shut down their operations permanently. These situations led to a sharp rise in unemployment in the country, with millions of people losing their jobs, resulting in people experiencing a loss or decline in income, causing some household groups to shift from higher income groups to lower income groups. As a consequence of the financial challenges people face, it is obvious that people will evaluate every expenses before spending so that their income can afford to cover their household expenses, leading to a reduction in the average household expenditure. However, the impact of COVID-19 goes beyond this. The demand and supply shocks it generates lead to an increase in price level, which in turn leads to a decrease in households' living standards. Therefore, the problem statement in this study is that a range of consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic have forced households to alter their consumption behavior. They will be more cautious, more frugal, and more considerate of every expenses to curb the financial impact of the pandemic on them. However, since the COVID-19 pandemic, the higher cost of living will worsen the household standard of living, especially for lower income households. Lower income households are the group most at risk of facing higher cost of living. This is because the higher prices will result in lower income households being unable to afford their basic living expenses. This situation will directly lead to a food insecurity and increase the financial pressure on lower income households, making it difficult for them to continue to survive and maintain their standard of living. The research questions in this study are: firstly, what are the demographic characteristics of residents in Penang? Secondly, do gender differences affect the household expenditure, household living standard, household income and government policy among residents in Penang during the COVID-19 pandemic? Thirdly, do different income levels affect the household expenditure, household living standard, household income and government policy among residents in Penang during the COVID-19 pandemic? Finally, is there a relationship between household expenditure, household living standard, and household income among residents in Penang during the COVID-19 pandemic? Therefore, based on the research questions, the research objectives in this study are: firstly, to identify the demographic characteristic of residents in Penang. Secondly, to examine gender differences affect the household expenditure, household living standard, household income and government policy among residents in Penang during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thirdly, to examine different incomes level affect the household expenditure, household living standard, household income and government policy among residents in Penang during the COVID-19 pandemic. Finally, to investigate the relationship between the household expenditure, household living standard, and household income among residents in Penang during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next, there are three theoretical reviews included in this study, which are the consumption theory, income theory, and living standard. For the consumption theory, according to Smith, consumption is the most important aspect of the economy, and all output must ultimately lead to a huge deposit of consumptions, which gives the ultimate impetus and lift to all economic activity. Whereas for the income theory, according to Esner, the length of time over which income is averaged or integrated determines the extent to which consumption is linked to income. Lastly, for living standard, Thomson states that individual living standards are reflected through employers' benefits, including occupational pensions rights, private schooling grants and tax relief, and higher education grants and subsidies. This study also includes two aspects of empirical review. First, for household expenditure during COVID-19 pandemic among genders, according to Chronopoulos et al., consumer spending responses differ across product categories and also vary by demographic characteristics such as gender, age, and locations. Whereas, according to Deng and Gwen, women are more likely than men to lose their jobs permanently as a result of the outbreak, as well as to be paid less for their labor, leading to a tendency for women to cut back on current consumptions and save more. For household expenditure during COVID-19 among income level, according to Hussein et al., Malaysian households will face greatest risk of unemployment during the pandemic due to the fact that their job opportunity will be severely limited due to the shrinking job market. They will experience income shocks due to their relatively low income levels, which in turn will cause them to struggle with increased expenditures. Next, for the sample and sampling technique, based on Krajewski and Morgan's method, the sample that should be included in this study is 385. Now, we come to the description analysis. The description analysis is used to analyze the demographic characteristic of the respondent in this study. So firstly, the gender pie chart shows that there were more female respondents than male respondents in this study. Besides, as we can see from the pie chart for the age group, the most of the respondents were aged under 30, followed by age between 30 to 40, then age between 41 to 50, and then the least age above 60. In addition, the pie chart for any group shows that the majority of the respondents were Chinese, followed by Malay, and the least by Indians. Furthermore, the pie chart of marital status shows that there are more single respondents than the married respondents in this study. Moreover, based on the pie chart of the highest level of education, the highest level of education for the majority of respondents was university, followed by college, then STBM or A-level or diploma, and the lowest was secondary school. Then, the pie chart for monthly household income demonstrates that the majority of respondents had a monthly household income of less than 1,000 ringgit, followed by 3,001 ringgit to 5,000, then 1,000 ringgit to 3,000 ringgit, followed by 5,001 ringgit to 7,000 ringgit, and 7,001 ringgit to 9,000 ringgit, and the least was above 9,000 ringgit. Lastly, the district pie chart shows that the most of the respondents were live in Seberang Perai Selatan, followed by Seberang Perai Utara, then Seberang Perai Tengah, followed by Timur Laut, and the least by Barat Daya. According to the figure showing the cross-tabulation of gender and monthly household income, it indicates that there were more females than males in all levels of monthly household income, except for respondents with monthly household income between 5,001 ringgit to 7,000 ringgit. Whereas, based on the cross-tabulation of age groups and monthly household incomes shown in the figure, we can see that there are more respondents aged under 30 years old than all other age groups for all levels of monthly household income. Next, the independent sample t-tests were carried out with the aim of investigating whether there are significant differences of household expenditure, household living standard, household incomes, and government policies among genders. Therefore, the following hypotheses were tested in order to achieve the second research objective. Firstly, for household expenditure, the null hypothesis is that there is no significant difference of household expenditure among genders, while the alternative hypothesis is that there is a significant difference of household expenditure among genders. According to the table, since the p-value of the t-test is 0.675, which is more than 5%, thus do not reject H now A. Therefore, the conclusion can be made that there is no significant difference of household expenditure among genders. Then, for household living standards, the null hypothesis is that there is no significant difference of household living standards among genders, while the alternative hypothesis is that there is a significant difference of household living standards among genders. According to the table, since the p-value of the t-test is 0.347, which is more than 5%, thus do not reject H now B. Therefore, the conclusion can be made that there is no significant difference of household living standards among genders. After that, for household income, the null hypothesis is that there is no significant difference of household income among genders, while the alternative hypothesis is that there is a significant difference of household income among genders. According to the table, since the p-value of the t-test is 0.137, which is more than 5%, thus do not reject H now C. Therefore, the conclusion can be made that there is no significant difference of household income among genders. Lastly, for government policies, the null hypothesis is that there is no significant difference of government policies among genders, while the alternative hypothesis is that there is a significant difference of government policies among genders. According to the table, since the p-value of the t-test is 0.671, which is more than 5%, thus do not reject H now D. Therefore, the conclusion can be made that there is no significant difference of government policies among genders. Now, we come to the one-way ANOVA. One-way ANOVA is performed with the objective of examining whether there are significant differences of household expenditure, household living standard, household income, and government policies among different income levels. Hence, to address the third research objective, the following hypotheses were tested. Firstly, for household expenditure, the null hypothesis is that there is no significant difference of household expenditure among income levels, while the alternative hypothesis is that there is a significant difference of household expenditure among income levels. According to the table, since the p-value of the ANOVA test is 0.759, which is more than 5%, thus do not reject H now E. Therefore, the conclusion can be made that there is no significant difference of household expenditure among income levels. Then, for household living standard, the null hypothesis is that there is no significant difference of household living standards among income levels, while the alternative hypothesis is that there is a significant difference of household living standards among income levels. According to the table, Since the p-value of the ANOVA test is 0.830, which is more than 5%, thus do not reject H naught F. Therefore, the conclusion can be made that there is no significant difference of household living standards among income levels. After that, for household income, the null hypothesis is that there is no significant difference of household income among income levels, while the alternative hypothesis is that there is a significant difference of household income among income levels. According to the table, since the p-value of the ANOVA test is 0.101, which is more than 5%, thus do not reject H naught G. Therefore, the conclusion can be made that there is no significant difference of household income among income levels. Lastly, for government policies, the null hypothesis is that there is no significant difference of government policies among income levels, while the alternative hypothesis is that there is a significant difference of government policies among income levels. According to the table, since the p-value of the ANOVA test is 0.053, which is more than 5%, thus do not reject H naught H. Therefore, the conclusion can be made that there is no significant difference of government policies among income levels. Now, we come to the Pearson correlations. Pearson correlation analysis is a means of testing if there is a significant relationship between household expenditure, household living standard, and household income. Therefore, for answering the fourth research objective, the following hypotheses were tested. For the Pearson correlations, the null hypothesis is that there is no significant relationship between the household expenditure, household living standard, and household income, while the alternative hypothesis is that there is a significant relationship between the household expenditure, household living standard, and household income. Based on the table, the correlation between the household expenditure and household living standard is 0.526, which illustrates a moderate positive correlations. Meantime, the correlations between the household expenditure and household income is 0.331, while the correlation between the household living standards and household income is 0.263, which illustrates a weak positive correlations. At the same time, the p-value for both the correlations between the household expenditure and household living standards, as well as the correlations between the household expenditure and the household income, was 0.000 and 0.010 respectively, both of which were less than 1%, whereas the p-value for the correlations between the household living standards and the household income was 0.042, which was less than 5%. All these results indicate that there is a significant relationship between the household expenditure, household living standard, and household incomes. Therefore, H naught I is rejected. Thus, the conclusion can be made that there is a significant relationship between the household expenditure, household living standard, and household income. Lastly, we come to the policy implications. This research is beneficial for the government and policymakers to formulate more effective measures to support every household in Malaysia, as it presents important information on the impact of household expenditure during the pandemic. As the impact of the pandemic severely hits household incomes, thus leading to a decline in their expenditure and standard of living, the government and policymakers should focus on initiatives or policy that could boost aggregate demand as well as expand the job market, thereby stimulating household spending. For instance, tax relief, financial assistance, moratorium, lower interest rate, subsidies for business and partnership with NGO and the private sector to create more jobs. As such, the source of income for households can be secured, thus assisting them to become more financially capable of affording the cost of living in order to sustain and survive during the pandemic. Besides, this study is also useful to other researchers to contribute to the literature on the impact of household expenditure during the pandemic, as it provides a scenario of the impact of household expenditure during the pandemic. Researchers could use the finding of this study in the future to analyze new potential factors and patterns of household expenditure during and after the pandemic. So that's all from me. Thank you.